Aloha, welcome to A Course in Miracles. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope that you're enjoying the lessons as much as I am, maybe even more. Maybe this is your first time. Maybe it's something that you've never been exposed to before, or maybe you've done the lesson several times. But I hope you're getting something out of it, and I hope it's bringing you into a new level of freedom and a new level of finding your true self and finding your Father and finding happiness and finding inner peace. Because that's what the Course is all about. I mean, if it wasn't granting those things or giving us those things, what would be the reason to do it? I sure wouldn't do it. We're on lesson 58. We're in the review lessons of A Course in Miracles, a workbook for students. The last idea that we looked at yesterday was, my mind is part of God's and I am very holy. So we're starting on this idea of holiness. The next few ideas are going to be all about holiness. And if you remember before, we talked about, holiness is a biblical word, and it has, a lot of shades of meaning that if you're not familiar with the Bible and the symbols used in the Bible, it may not have much meaning to you. So I want to just kind of go over what is the biblical or the Course's idea of holiness. And when we had mentioned before that it's sort of, you could substitute the words sinlessness or innocence or pure or wholeness without separation. These are all types of ways that the word holiness is used, and the idea sort of behind it. And it's not the biblical idea that I often confuse it with, which was that God is holy. In other words, He is separate from us. He's out there other than what we are. And He is just way beyond what anything as we mere mortals could even conceive of. It's just like, whoa, it's God. Take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. Be very respectful and all of this. That's really not the idea of holiness, in my opinion, that the Course is talking about. So let's look at this. Yesterday, again, my mind is part of God's. God is holy, pure, sinless, innocent, perfect. And therefore, since my mind is part of God's mind, and since God is holy, sinless, perfect, all these things, I am too, because I'm part of God. There's no part of me that isn't part of God. No real part of me that isn't part of God. So it says, the first idea, my holiness envelops everything I see. And we talked about the word envelop, sort of like when you dip something in another substance, like my mom used to make these golf balls, chocolate peanut butter golf balls, and graham crackers. They were so good. She used to make them at Christmas. And you dip them into this chocolate that would cover them, and it would totally envelop these golf balls that we had spent time making into little round balls. So that's the idea. My holiness totally surrounds and encapsulates everything I see. From my holiness, once we discover the atonement principle, that the separation never occurred, and we see our holiness, that from that holiness does the perception of the real world come. And we've been talking about seeing the real world. Now this is how we see, how we really see with the vision of Christ, everything and everyone, the real world. When we talked about the real world is there's two ideas. There's form and content that the Course talks about. And form usually has to do with, what's happening in the physical around us. But content is that which is beyond it and behind it that you don't really see. And so when we were talking about the real world, we're not really necessarily talking about seeing things, forms of things, physical things differently. But we're perceiving the content differently. So the real world is out there, but we're not perceiving it. But once we do perceive it, it's not going to be a different world. It's the same world, but we're perceiving it different. So from my holiness does the perceiving of the real world come. And having forgiven, and this is another major principle in the Course, is forgiveness. That's the way that all the sin and guilt that we think is in our mind, but we don't want to be there, and we've projected it onto the world. That, through this forgiving and seeing the world as holy and sinless, and ourselves as holy and sinless, that is where we no longer see the world as sinful or myself as sinful and guilty. I can accept the innocence that is the truth about me. Innocence, holiness, sinlessness. Seen through understanding eyes, the holiness of the world is all I see. For I can picture only the thoughts I hold about myself. So out there, I can only picture the thoughts that I hold about myself. And if the thoughts that I hold about myself are that I'm not holy, and I am separate from God, and I am, a sinner, then that's how I'm going to see. Those thoughts are going to project a world of where I see everyone else as sinners and guilty or evil. But if I see myself as I truly am, which is not separate from God, never has been separate from God, that is still as God created me, holy, the Son of God, that's how I'll see the rest of the world. So it's all about getting into our right mind. That's what these workbook lessons are helping us to do, to get into our right mind with our true thoughts, God's thoughts. And then those thoughts will be projected out into the world. And we will see ourselves as holy and everyone else as holy. And it's not like we'll see ourselves as holy and other people, this guy and that guy is holy, but that person over there is unholy. and that person over there is truly evil. We won't see that anymore because that isn't the truth about ourselves, and it isn't the truth about the world. So we've got to have our perception of ourselves purified or brought to the truth, and see things not through the ego thought system, but through that which is true. And that's what the Course is bringing us to. So that's what it talks about, understanding eyes. Seeing through understanding eyes, the holiness of the world is all I see. For I can picture only the thoughts I hold about myself. My holiness blesses the world. So it's not just me, it's the whole world. My holiness blesses the world because we're shared, we are one. The perception of my holiness does not bless me alone. Everyone and everything I see in its light shares in the joy that it brings to me. This is another that idea of if you want to change the world, you have to first change the way you perceive it. Change the way you perceive yourself. And once that happens, everything else changes. Because the world is nothing but illusions, the way we perceive it. The real world is even an illusion too, the Course says. But it is so much like heaven that what we're perceiving is so much like heaven that it won't be a shock to us when God finally brings us over into total oneness. So we're having our perception of ourselves healed, and that changes the perception that we have of everything and everyone else. And it shares that joy that we have with them. There is nothing that is apart from this joy, because there is nothing that does not share my holiness. As I recognize my holiness, so does the holiness of the world shine forth for everyone to see. It's just what we were talking about. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. The next idea. My holiness is unlimited in its power to heal because it is unlimited in its power to save. What is there to be saved from except illusions? That's what we were talking about. Saved from illusions. And illusions are not real. And what are illusions except false ideas about myself? False ideas. That I'm separate from you. That I'm separate from the divine. That I'm sinful. That I am guilty. That I am unworthy, that I deserve to be punished. All these things are illusions, they're false ideas, they aren't true. And that's what we're saved from. My holiness undoes all these illusions, all by asserting the truth about me. In the presence of my holiness, which I share with God Himself, all idols vanish. And we talked about idols before. Idols are just the things of this world that we trust rather than trusting the love of God. You know, endless list of things. My holiness is my salvation. Since my holiness saves me from all guilt, recognizing my holiness is recognizing my salvation. It is also recognizing the salvation of the world. Once I've accepted my holiness, that's the atonement. Accepting the atonement for myself, the Course says, nothing can make me afraid. Nothing can make me afraid. There's nothing to fear. Why? Because the idea that I'm a sinner and I'm guilty, and so therefore right around the corner, when I'm least expecting it, boom, I'm going to be punished. My old karma is going to catch up with me and bad things are going to happen. I can't really expect for good things to happen because I have all this bad karma and sin in my life. I mean, how can we be at peace that way? We need to be saved from these false ideas, because that is like the heart of fear. We're afraid of what's going to happen to us, what God's going to do to us, what other people he or she will allow to be done to us, and all kinds of crazy ideas like that. So once I've accepted my holiness, nothing can make me afraid, because I'm innocent, sinless, guiltless. And because I'm unafraid, everyone must share my understanding, which is the gift of God to me and to the world. So, this is part of the text is often hard for us many times. I started to say some people, but it's hard for me sometimes too, to really think of yourself as holy, sinless, guiltless. Because in the ego's memory, the ego can remind you of all kinds of things you've done to hurt other people, or things that you feel guilty about. And the Course is not saying that the ego is sinless. And if you're identifying with the ego, you'll definitely won't feel sinless. You'll definitely feel guilty. But what the Course is saying is that the ego is not who you are. It never has been who you are. And it can never touch who you are. So this is not who you are. And eventually we will learn that the ego is not even real itself. It's a false idea. And once that idea is exposed for what it is, like when you see a magic trick, like how it actually works and happens, it has no power over you anymore. Like it's been, whoa, that's not even real. That was just a trick. That was just a magic trick. And that's the same way the ego is. The ego doesn't exist. He's like a shadow. I mean, you can see it, but there's nothing there. Once, it's like the dark. When you turn on the light, where did the dark go? It never really existed. It was just the absence of the light that caused or allowed the dark. And that's what the ego is. So I am blessed as a son of God. Herein lies my claim to all good and only good. That's what you can claim, and I claim every day. I wake up in the morning and I say, good and only good goes forth from me. Good and only good returns to me. How can I say that? because it's true. Because I am blessed as a son of God, and so are you. And there isn't anybody who isn't a son of God. Now, the ego isn't the son of God, but nobody, that's a false, mind-made image, an illusion. But the essence of every single person in the world, the true spark of life, is a son of God. So there's no one out there that you can exclude. And if you do exclude, you won't see yourself as a son of God. If there's one person that you exclude and say, that person is not a son of God, they are sinful, they are guilty, they deserve to be punished. That's why we don't make any distinctions in this course. We're training our mind not to make distinctions, because one distinction, and you won't see it. If you see anyone as sinful, you will see yourself as sinful. And I'll see myself as sinful. If I withhold forgiveness from anyone, I withhold forgiveness from myself, because we are one. And there's no exceptions, no exclusions. So herein lies, I am blessed as a son of God. Herein lies my claim to all good and only good. I am blessed as a son of God. And so is everyone. There is no us and them. We are all sons and daughters of the Most High. All good things are mine and yours, because God intended them for me. I cannot suffer any loss or deprivation or pain because of who I am. My Father supports me, protects me, and directs me in all things. His care for me is infinite and is with me forever. I am eternally blessed as a son of God. You are eternally blessed as a son of God. And this may seem really hard to believe, because so much of the experience that you've had up till now would not necessarily, or may not necessarily in your mind, support this idea that you're wholly sinless and you are a son of God and good and only good is coming to you. But the thing is that the reason that you haven't, it's hard to believe that, is because a part of you, maybe even a large part of your mind, still believes that you are the ego, the false self, that's your identity. But that's okay. The more we go through this course, the more the witnesses for your true self will make themselves known to you. Just practice the course. It says you don't even have to believe these things are true about yourself. Just practice them and let the course work its miracle on you. This is what it means by a course in miracle. And your eyes will open. That's the miracle. You will get a new perception. The miracle is a change in perception. So get ready. It's coming, if it's not already here. A change in perception. A miracle. You are blessed as a son of God. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Aloha.